Billionaire left his wife to start a family with his pregnant mistress. What happened next was beyond his imagination. You made me feel tolerated, Adrian. Like I was a pleasant accessory to your life, but never the focus. My art was a hobby you indulged. My dreams were secondary to yours. Those words hit Adrian Westfield like a physical blow as he stood in the pristine art gallery, staring at the woman he'd abandoned 8 years ago. Vivian looked him directly in the eyes, her voice steady, her composure unshakable. I forgive you, she continued. Not for your sake, but for mine. I couldn't build this life while carrying that anger. Adrian's throat tightened. What life? What are you talking about? Vivian gestured around the gallery, at the walls adorned with prestigious art, at the elegant space filled with collectors and critics. This life. The gallery I own. The career I built. The man who actually values me. She glanced toward a distinguished-looking man across the room, then back at Adrian. You miss who I was when I made myself small enough to fit into your idea of a wife. That woman is gone. I didn't just survive our divorce, Adrian. I transcended it. And I would never go back, not to who I was, and certainly not to you. Have you ever seen someone you threw away and realized they became everything you needed, but only after you left? Have you ever made a choice so catastrophic that you spend the rest of your life watching someone else live the dream that should have been yours? Adrian Westfield destroyed his marriage for passion, for excitement, for a woman who promised him everything his wife supposedly couldn't give him. He got exactly what he wanted. A new family. A fresh start. The life he thought he deserved. But 8 years later, standing in that gallery, watching his ex-wife smile at another man with genuine happiness radiating from her eyes, Adrian realized something devastating. The woman he left behind didn't crumble. She didn't spend years pining for him. She didn't become a cautionary tale of abandonment. No. She became extraordinary. And he became the biggest fool who ever lived. If you've ever questioned a major life decision, if you've ever wondered whether the grass is really greener on the other side, you need to hear this story. Because what happened to Adrian Westfield is a masterclass in karma, consequences, and the brutal truth that sometimes the person you discard becomes priceless, while everything you gain turns to dust. Hit that like button right now if you believe in karma, and stay with me because this story will change how you see every choice you make. I'm Mr. Steven, and this is a story about a man who thought he was trading up, but was actually throwing away gold for glitter. Let me take you back to where it all began. 3 days before that gallery encounter, Adrian Westfield sat in the back of his luxury sedan, scrolling through his tablet as his driver navigated the morning traffic. At 42 years old, Adrian had built an empire. His architectural firm, Westfield Design Company, had shaped the city's skyline with innovative buildings that earned international recognition. His penthouse overlooked the waterfront. His bank account had more zeros than most people could imagine. By every measurable standard, Adrian Westfield was successful. Yet as he sipped his third espresso of the morning, staring at emails that all seemed to blur together, a familiar emptiness gnawed at him. Another day, another dollar, he muttered to himself. Sir. His driver, Michael, glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just talking to myself. The car glided through the financial district toward his office, but a notification on his tablet made Adrian pause. A local news app, something he rarely paid attention to, displayed a headline that stopped his breath. Local hero, single mother builds acclaimed art gallery against all odds. Adrian's finger hovered over the screen. Then he saw the photo. Vivian. His Vivian. Except she wasn't his anymore. She hadn't been for 8 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Not that he was counting. But there she was. Older, yes, but transformed in a way that made his chest constrict. She stood in front of a modern building with elegant signage reading Cross Gallery. Her dark hair was shorter now, swept into a sophisticated style. Her smile was confident, radiant. She looked like she owned the world. Adrian's hands trembled as he enlarged the photo, studying every detail of this woman he'd once known so intimately. When had she opened a gallery? How had he not known? They lived in the same city, moved in overlapping professional circles. How had 8 years passed without him knowing she'd become this? Michael, Adrian's voice came out rough. Change of plans. Take me to Cross Gallery. It's on 5th and Morrison. Sir, you have a board meeting at 9 o'clock. Cancel it. Family emergency. The words felt foreign on his tongue. Family emergency. He had no family, not really. His marriage to Sienna had long ago devolved into cold coexistence. His 8-year-old son Jasper was raised primarily by nannies and tutors. Adrian's life was full of possessions and achievements but empty of connection. The car turned toward the arts district, and Adrian's mind flooded with memories he'd spent years suppressing. The day he'd packed his bags while Vivian sobbed on their apartment couch. Her voice, broken and desperate. Please, Adrian. Whatever I did wrong, I'll fix it. Don't do this. His response, so cold it still made him flinch to remember. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just that Sienna is pregnant. I have to do the right thing. The right thing. He'd actually believed that. He'd convinced himself that abandoning his wife of 5 years, the woman who'd supported him through architecture school, who'd worked 2 jobs so he could take unpaid internships at prestigious firms, who'd believed in him when no one else did, was somehow noble because another woman carried his child. I'm sorry, but I loved her more. That's what he'd said. 6 words that destroyed Vivian's world. 6 words he'd spent 8 years trying to justify. The car pulled up to Cross Gallery, and Adrian sat motionless, staring at the building. It was beautiful. Clean lines, lots of glass, the kind of thoughtful design that spoke of significant investment and impeccable taste. This wasn't some small vanity project. This was a serious establishment. Wait here, Adrian told Michael, stepping out onto the sidewalk. His legs felt unsteady as he approached the entrance. Through the large windows, he could see a gathering inside. People in elegant attire, champagne glasses, the warm glow of gallery lighting. Some kind of event. Adrian pushed through the door, immediately enveloped by soft classical music and the murmur of cultured conversation. The space was even more impressive inside. High ceilings, expertly lit artwork, a sense of openness and possibility. And there, moving through the crowd with practiced grace, was Vivian. She wore a midnight blue dress that draped elegantly over her frame. She'd always been beautiful, but this was different. This Vivian carried herself with authority, with presence. She laughed at something a silver-haired gentleman said, her hand resting lightly on his arm, completely at ease. Then Adrian saw him. A man standing close to Vivian, his hand resting on the small of her back with casual intimacy. He was tall, distinguished-looking, maybe 45. The way he looked at Vivian, the way she leaned into him slightly, spoke of real connection. Adrian's heart hammered against his ribs. Adrian? He turned to find Sienna beside him, her expression sharp with suspicion. His wife had followed him into the gallery, her designer heels clicking on the polished floor. Who is that woman you're staring at? Sienna demanded. Before Adrian could answer, a young woman in gallery staff attire approached them with a professional smile. Good evening. Welcome to Cross Gallery. Are you here for the exhibition opening? Adrian couldn't form words. Sienna's eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. That's her, isn't it? Your ex-wife. The staff member's smile faltered slightly. I'm afraid this is a private event this evening. If you're interested in viewing Miss Cross's collection, I'd be happy to schedule an appointment. The polite dismissal cut through Adrian's paralysis. Miss Cross. Vivian had taken back her maiden name. Of course she had. Why would she keep his name after what he'd done? I'd like to speak with Vivian, Adrian managed. We're old friends. The staff member glanced across the room where Vivian was now deep in conversation with a group of collectors. Ms. Cross is occupied with clients this evening. If you'll leave your information, I can have her office contact you. This is absurd, Sienna snapped. Do you know who my husband is? Westfield Architecture has designed half this city's landmark buildings. I'm aware of Mr. Westfield's reputation, the staff member replied coolly. Ms. Cross simply wanted to ensure you weren't inconvenienced by the crowd tonight. She knows how valuable your time is. The subtext was clear. Leave. Now. Adrian started to protest, but movement across the room caught his eye. Vivian had looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded gallery, and for 3 suspended heartbeats, the world stopped. Adrian tried to communicate everything in that gaze. I'm sorry. I was wrong. You're magnificent. I didn't know. I should have known. But Vivian's expression remained serene, unreadable. Then, with deliberate slowness, she turned to the distinguished man beside her, rose on her toes, and kissed his cheek. Her eyes never left Adrian's. Message received. Let's go, Sienna hissed, grabbing Adrian's arm. This is humiliating. Adrian allowed himself to be pulled toward the exit, but he looked back once more. Vivian had already turned away, laughing at something one of her guests said, completely at ease. Like he wasn't even there. Like he was nothing. The night air hit Adrian like cold water as they stepped outside. Sienna was already on her phone, likely texting one of her friends about the drama. Adrian stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the gallery windows, watching shadows move inside. Are you seriously just going to stand here? Sienna's voice dripped with disdain. God, Adrian, have some dignity. But dignity was the last thing Adrian felt as he climbed back into the car. Michael pulled away from the curb, and Adrian twisted in his seat to keep the gallery in view until it disappeared around a corner. That night, sleep was impossible. Adrian lay in his king-sized bed, the city lights casting shadows across the ceiling, while Sienna scrolled through her phone beside him. They hadn't spoken since returning from the gallery. They rarely spoke about anything meaningful anymore. Their marriage, if it could even be called that anymore, was a shell. The passion that had once felt so intoxicating, so worth destroying his life for, had evaporated years ago. What remained was resentment, routine, and their son Jasper, the only good thing to come from their union. Adrian thought about the first year with Sienna. How exciting it had been. How alive he'd felt. Sienna had been a successful interior designer when they met, bold and beautiful and utterly different from Vivian's quiet steadiness. She'd challenged him, pushed him to take risks in his designs that earned him recognition. But somewhere along the way, challenge became criticism. Passion became volatility. The woman who'd seemed so exciting revealed herself to be perpetually dissatisfied. Nothing was ever enough. Not the penthouse, not the luxury cars, not the exotic vacations, not Adrian himself. By year 3, he'd realized his mistake. By year 5, he'd accepted it. By year 8, he was simply going through the motions. I'm going to the office, Adrian said quietly, throwing off the covers. At 2 in the morning. Sienna didn't even look up from her screen. Can't sleep. His home office was down the hall, a space of dark wood and expensive furnishings that felt more like a museum than a workplace. Adrian closed the door, sat at his desk, and opened his laptop with trembling hands. He typed 3 words into the search bar. Vivian Cross Gallery. The results flooded his screen, and with each click, each article, each interview, Adrian felt his chest constrict tighter. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. After he left, after he'd abandoned her with nothing but divorce papers and a settlement she'd barely accepted, Vivian had rebuilt her life from the ground up. And not just rebuilt it. She'd transformed it into something extraordinary. Article after article documented her journey. Her paintings had caught the attention of a prestigious collector 3 years after their divorce. That first sale led to others. She'd invested the money carefully, continued creating, and 4 years ago opened Cross Gallery with the mission of showcasing underrepresented artists. The gallery had become one of the city's most respected. Critics praised Vivian's eye for talent. Collectors trusted her judgment. Young artists competed for the chance to show their work in her space. Adrian clicked on an interview from 2 years ago. The photo showed Vivian in her gallery, standing beside a massive canvas alive with color and emotion. After my divorce, the interviewer's question read, "You experienced a remarkable artistic breakthrough. What changed?" Vivian's response made Adrian's throat close. "I realized I'd spent years making myself smaller. I'd dimmed my light to make someone else comfortable. After my marriage ended, I made a choice. I could let it break me, or let it remake me. I chose the latter. I poured everything into my art, discovered my voice, found my strength. The gallery came from that. It's a space for artists who were told they weren't enough, who were made to feel their passion was frivolous. Here, we celebrate that fire." Adrian read the words 3 times, each pass cutting deeper. Had he done that? Made her feel small? Made her feel like her art was frivolous? Yes, a voice whispered in his mind. Yes, you did. He'd never taken her painting seriously. He'd called it a hobby, a nice creative outlet. When she'd talked about showing her work in galleries, he'd smiled indulgently and suggested she focus on more practical pursuits. When she'd spent hours in their cramped apartment bedroom that doubled as her studio, he'd complained about the smell of paint. "You're talented, baby," he remembered saying once. "But you know we need to be realistic. My career has to come first right now. Once the firm takes off, then you can explore your art more seriously." Except his firm had taken off, and he'd still treated her dreams as secondary. As less important. As something to indulge when convenient. Adrian scrolled further, desperate and masochistic in equal measure. He found a Society page article from 3 months ago. The photo showed Vivian at a charity gala, radiant in a gold gown. Beside her, his hand resting comfortably on her waist, was the man from the gallery. The caption read, "Renowned gallery owner Vivian Cross with philanthropist Dr. Marcus Chen." Adrian's fingers flew across the keyboard. Dr. Marcus Chen. The search results painted a picture of a man who was, in every measurable way, Adrian's superior. Cardiologist. Chief of surgery at St. Catherine's Hospital. Widower who'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago. Since then, he'd thrown himself into charitable work, particularly foundations supporting arts education for underprivileged youth. Of course, Adrian thought bitterly. Of course she'd found someone like this. Someone accomplished and kind. Someone who probably valued her dreams instead of tolerating them. He clicked through photos. Marcus and Vivian at hospital fundraisers, gallery openings, community events. In every image, they looked like they belonged together. Both successful. Both dedicated to work that mattered. Both clearly, devastatingly happy. The office door opened. Adrian slammed the laptop shut, but not quickly enough. "Are you seriously stalking your ex-wife online?" Sienna stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her silk robe hanging open over expensive pajamas. "I was just looking." "You were obsessing." Sienna's laugh was harsh. "Pathetic. You left her for me, remember? Pregnant, needing you, and you chose me." The reminder felt like an accusation now, not a victory. "Go back to bed, Sienna. Don't dismiss me." She moved closer, and Adrian could smell wine on her breath. "You've been distant for months. Years, really. Is this why? Still pining for the little artist you threw away?" "I'm not pining. You are." Sienna's voice rose. "You saw her tonight, looking gorgeous and successful, and now you're wondering if you made a mistake. Well, guess what, Adrian? You don't get to change your mind. You made your choice. I know that. Do you? She leaned against his desk, and Adrian saw something rare in her eyes. Vulnerability. We have a son together. A life. You don't get to check out just because your ex-wife got hot and opened a gallery. Adrian looked at his wife, really looked at her, and felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Regret, yes. Resentment, absolutely. But also pity. Because Sienna knew. She knew this marriage was a mistake, held together by inertia and Jasper and the massive cost of admitting failure. I'm not checking out, Adrian said quietly. I'm just processing. Process faster. Sienna straightened, her moment of vulnerability closing like a shutter. And maybe put that processing energy into booking us a vacation. Jasper and I deserve Paris. God knows you can afford it after that last commission. She left without waiting for a response, her footsteps receding down the hallway. Adrian sat alone in his office, surrounded by architectural awards and photos of buildings he designed, feeling the crushing weight of his choices pressing down until he could barely breathe. The following 3 days were torture. Adrian went through the motions at work, but his mind was elsewhere. In meetings, he found himself staring out windows. At his drafting table, his designs felt uninspired, mechanical. His partners noticed. Adrian, are you all right? Richard, his senior partner, pulled him aside after a particularly lifeless presentation. This isn't like you. The clients expected innovation, and you gave them something I could have drafted in my sleep. I'm fine. Just tired. You're not fine. Richard's concern was genuine. They'd been friends for 20 years. Take some time off. Clear your head. Whatever's going on, deal with it before it affects the firm's reputation. But time off meant more time alone with his thoughts, more time to obsess over what he'd seen in that gallery. More time to compare the life Vivian had built to the hollow existence he was trapped in. On the third day, Adrian made a decision. He called Cross Gallery and requested a private appointment. The receptionist was polite but firm. Ms. Cross's calendar was fully booked for the next 6 weeks. Tell her it's Adrian Westfield. Tell her I'd like to speak with her personally. There was a pause. A conversation happening in the background, words too muted to hear clearly. Then the receptionist returned. Ms. Cross can see you tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. Adrian's heart raced. Thank you. I'll be there. That night, he barely slept. He rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd explain himself, what questions he'd ask. But every script he prepared felt inadequate for the enormity of what he needed to communicate. The next afternoon, Adrian stood outside Cross Gallery 15 minutes early, his palms sweating despite the cool weather. The gallery was quieter during daytime hours, only a few visitors browsing the current exhibition. Classical music played softly as natural light poured through carefully designed skylights. Adrian recognized good architecture when he saw it, and whoever had designed this space understood how to showcase art. The thought stung. He should have been the one to design Vivian's gallery. It should have been his gift to her, his way of supporting her dreams. But that would have required him to value her dreams in the first place. Mr. Westfield. He turned to find Vivian standing in the doorway of a back office. In the gallery's natural light, she was even more striking than at the evening event. She wore fitted black pants and a cream silk blouse, her hair swept into an elegant twist. Professional, composed, and utterly in control. Vivian. His voice came out hoarse. Thank you for seeing me. She gestured toward a seating area away from the main gallery space, a conversation nook with leather chairs that probably cost more than the entire apartment they'd shared during their marriage. They sat, and Vivian crossed her legs, waiting. Her posture was impeccable, her expression polite but distant. Like he was a potential client, not the man she'd once loved enough to marry. "The gallery is beautiful," Adrian began. "I'm impressed by what you've built." "Thank you." Her tone was courteous, nothing more. "I had no idea you'd done this. That you'd become so successful. Why would you know?" Vivian's eyebrow arched slightly. "We haven't spoken in 8 years." "I know. I just thought, in a city this size, our paths would have crossed. I made sure they didn't." She said it matter-of-factly, without malice. "I built my life in spaces you don't occupy." The words landed like stones. Adrian swallowed hard. "Was there something specific you wanted to discuss, or is this a social call?" "I wanted to see you. To talk. It's been 8 years." 8 years, 2 months, and 17 days, Vivian interrupted softly. "Since you walked out. Since you told me you loved someone else more." The precision of her count made his chest tighten. "Vivian, Why are you here, Adrian?" She leaned forward slightly, and he caught the scent of her perfume. Different from what she used to wear. More sophisticated, like everything else about her. "What do you want from me?" "I saw you the other night. With that man. Dr. Chen. Marcus." Warmth entered her voice when she said his name, and Adrian felt a spike of irrational jealousy. "Yes. We've been together for 2 years. 2 years. Only 2 years, yet the way she spoke about him suggested more depth than Adrian had experienced in his entire marriage to Sienna. "Are you happy?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Vivian's smile was genuine, radiant. "Incredibly. Marcus is kind, supportive, passionate about things that matter. He encourages my work, celebrates my success." She paused, and her next words cut like surgical blades. "He makes me feel valued." Each word was a knife. Adrian forced himself to ask. "Did I not make you feel valued?" Vivian studied him for a long moment, and something in her gaze softened. Not pity, exactly, but perhaps understanding of how difficult this truth would be to hear. "You made me feel tolerated, Adrian. Like I was a pleasant accessory to your life, but never the focus. My art was a hobby you indulged. My dreams were secondary to yours. Always." "That's not true." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. "Adrian." She said his name with something almost like gentleness. "Don't rewrite history. You know exactly how our marriage was. I was so in love with you, I convinced myself being in your shadow was enough. I told myself that supporting your dreams was the same as you supporting mine. But it wasn't. You needed a wife who made you comfortable, who didn't challenge you, who stayed small so you could shine brighter. I never asked you to stay small. You didn't have to ask. You just never noticed when I made myself that way." She paused, and when she continued, her voice was steady but layered with old pain. "Do you know how many times I started to tell you I wanted to pursue my art more seriously? How many conversations I began and then abandoned because I could see you weren't really listening? You'd smile and nod and say, 'That's nice, baby,' and then pivot back to talking about your latest project." Adrian's throat felt like sandpaper. "I didn't realize." "I know. And that's almost worse than if you'd actively discouraged me. You just genuinely didn't see me as anything more than a supporting character in your story." "Vivian." His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." "I know." Her expression gentled further. "And I forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine. I couldn't build this life while carrying that anger. You've built something extraordinary." "I have." Pride rang clear in her voice. "After you left, I had a choice. Let it break me or let it remake me. I chose the latter. I poured everything into my art, discovered my voice, found my strength. The gallery came from that. Marcus came from that." She gestured around the beautiful space. The life I have now, the life I absolutely love, came from the ashes of what you destroyed. Adrian absorbed this, the bitter irony cutting deep. His abandonment had freed her to become more than she'd ever been with him. The cruelest joke of all. How is Sienna? Vivian asked, and the question held no malice, only mild curiosity. She's fine. We're fine. The lie tasted bitter. Vivian's knowing look said she heard the untruth. And your son? Jasper, right? He's 8. Smart kid. The words felt hollow because they were. He barely knew his son beyond report cards and supervised weekend activities. I'm glad. And Vivian seemed to mean it. I'm glad you have your family, Adrian. Are you? He couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. Are you really glad, or does part of you enjoy seeing me realize I made the wrong choice? Vivian stood, and Adrian knew the conversation was ending. She moved toward the gallery entrance, a clear but not unkind dismissal. I don't take joy in your regret, Adrian. I take joy in my happiness. That's the difference between us now. You're still looking backward. I only look forward. She turned to face him fully, and for the first time, he saw a flash of real anger beneath her composed exterior. I miss you, Adrian admitted desperately. God, Vivian, I miss you so much. You miss who I was when I made myself small enough to fit into your idea of a wife. Vivian's voice sharpened. That woman is gone. I didn't just survive our divorce, Adrian. I transcended it. And I would never go back, not to who I was, and certainly not to you. The words should have devastated him. Instead, they filled him with profound admiration for this woman he'd been too blind to appreciate when she was his. He's lucky, Adrian said quietly. Dr. Chen. He's very lucky. No. Vivian's smile was radiant, triumphant. I'm lucky. I found someone who sees all of me and loves what he sees. That's not luck for him. That's just him being smart enough to recognize value. Unlike me, Adrian heard in the unsaid words. If this story is hitting close to home, if you've ever questioned a major life decision, drop a comment below sharing your experience. And make sure you're subscribed to Mr. Steven Stories, because these life lessons might just save you from making the same mistakes. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your perspective. Adrian left the gallery without another word, stepping into afternoon sunshine that felt too bright, too cheerful for the devastation unfolding in his chest. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, unable to drive, unable to move, unable to process the enormity of what he'd just learned. Vivian hadn't just moved on. She'd evolved. She'd become everything he'd needed without realizing it. And now she belonged to someone else. Someone better. The weeks that followed were torture. Adrian went through the motions at work, but his heart wasn't in it. His designs lost their innovative edge. Clients noticed. Partners worried. At home, things deteriorated rapidly. Sienna's complaints escalated from background noise to constant assault. The penthouse felt like a cage. Jasper, sensing the tension, became withdrawn, spending more time in his room with video games and less time engaging with either parent. One evening, Adrian came home to find Sienna in the dining room, a glass of wine in hand, her expression unreadable. We need to talk, she said. Adrian set down his briefcase, exhaustion settling into his bones. What is it? I'm leaving. She said it casually, like announcing a trip to the grocery store. I've rented a condo in the Arts District. Jasper and I are moving out next week. Adrian stared at her, the words not quite computing. What? You heard me. This marriage is dead, Adrian. Has been for years. I'm done pretending. What about Jasper? Shared custody. Sienna took a sip of wine. I'll have my lawyer send over the proposal. I'm not trying to be vindictive. I just want out. Adrian sank into a chair, his mind reeling. After 8 years, after everything they destroyed to be together, it was ending like this. Not with passion or drama, but with administrative efficiency. You've been checked out since you saw her at that gallery, Sienna continued. Don't deny it. And honestly, I'm tired of competing with a ghost. Vivian isn't a ghost. She's very much alive and thriving. Not her ghost. Sienna's voice was almost gentle. The ghost of the man you thought you'd be when you chose me. The passionate, bold decision-maker who was willing to burn everything down for love. She laughed bitterly. Turns out burning things down is the easy part. Living in the ashes is harder. For once, Adrian had no response. I'm not blameless, Sienna said, surprising him. I knew you were married. I pursued you anyway. I told myself it was true love, destiny, that we were meant to be together. But we both know what it really was. Excitement. Rebellion. Selfishness. We hurt someone deeply to get what we wanted. She met his eyes. And karma's a bitch, isn't it? The divorce papers arrived within a week. The settlement was expensive but relatively amicable. Two people who'd burned everything down to be together now couldn't wait to be apart. 6 months later, Adrian sat alone in his downsized apartment. The penthouse was sold, the proceeds split. Jasper was with Sienna for the week. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Adrian had tried to throw himself into work, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. He tried dating, but every woman felt like a pale imitation of what he'd had with Vivian and lost. He tried therapy, but talking about his mistakes didn't make them hurt less. It was a Friday night, the kind that used to mean dinner parties and social events in his old life. Now it meant takeout and silence. Adrian sat on his couch, his phone in hand, fighting the urge he'd fought for months. Finally, he gave in. He typed 3 words. Vivian Cross News. The first result made his blood run cold. Local gallery owner engaged to philanthropist Dr. Marcus Chen. Adrian's hands trembled as he clicked the link. The photo showed Vivian beaming, a stunning diamond ring on her finger, wrapped in Marcus's arms. They were on a beach at sunset, both barefoot, both radiant with joy. They looked like something from a romance movie, too perfect to be real. But it was real. Devastatingly, completely real. The article was a fluff piece, the kind society pages loved. It detailed Marcus's romantic proposal at the vineyard where they'd had their first date. It quoted Vivian's response when asked about her engagement. Marcus makes me believe in happy endings, she'd said. After everything I've been through, I thought maybe I wasn't meant for this kind of joy. But he proved me wrong every single day. I can't wait to spend my life with him. Adrian read those words 3 times, each pass cutting deeper. After everything I've been through. She meant him. She meant the devastation he'd caused. And Marcus had healed it. Marcus had shown her what real love looked like. Marcus got to have the future Adrian had thrown away. The article continued with details about the wedding, planned for spring at a countryside vineyard. It mentioned the gallery's expansion to a second location. It quoted friends saying things like they're perfect together and she deserves this happiness. Adrian closed his laptop with shaking hands, set it aside, and buried his face in his palms. And finally, after months of holding it together, after maintaining the facade that he was fine, that the divorce from Sienna was mutual and amicable, that he was moving forward with his life, Adrian let himself break. He cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of grief so profound it felt like drowning. He cried for what he destroyed. He cried for the life he could have had. He cried for Vivian, who'd loved him with her whole heart, who'd made herself smaller to fit into his world, who'd supported his dreams while he dismissed hers. And he cried for himself. For the fool he'd been. For the man who'd convinced himself that passion meant compatibility, that excitement was the same as love, that he deserved more than what he had. He'd wanted a second chance at love. He'd thought Sienna was it. Instead, he'd destroyed his first chance, poisoned his second, and lost everything that mattered. When the tears finally stopped, Adrian sat in the silence of his apartment, feeling hollowed out but somehow clearer. He'd spent 6 months avoiding this reckoning, but it had found him anyway. Some choices can't be unmade. Some damage can't be undone. And some women you lose will not only survive without you, they'll thrive beyond your wildest imagination. Adrian picked up his phone and opened his messages. He scrolled to Jasper's name and typed, "Hey buddy, want to grab lunch this weekend? Just you and me?" The response came quickly, "Yeah dad. That'd be cool." It was a small thing. A tiny step. But it was something. If Adrian couldn't fix what he'd broken with Vivian, couldn't reclaim what he'd thrown away, he could at least try not to make the same mistakes with his son. The months that followed were a study in acceptance. Adrian didn't stop thinking about Vivian, that wasn't possible. But he stopped torturing himself with constant searches, stopped driving past her gallery, stopped imagining scenarios where she'd take him back. He focused on Jasper. Real conversations, not expensive gifts as guilt offerings. Attending soccer games and school events. Learning about his son's actual interests instead of assuming he knew. Being present instead of just providing. He went to therapy. Really committed to it. Unpacking his patterns of selfishness, fear, and ego. Understanding how he'd used ambition as armor against real intimacy. Recognizing that he'd sabotaged his marriage to Vivian long before Sienna came along. He worked on becoming better. Not for Vivian, that ship had sailed. But for himself. For Jasper. For whatever future relationships might be possible if he could learn to value people instead of using them as props in his story. Before you go, I want to hear from you. What's the most important lesson you're taking from Adrian's story? Drop it in the comments. And if this video made you think differently about your own relationships, your own choices, give it a like and share it with someone who needs this reminder. Spring came. Adrian saw the wedding announcement in the society pages. He didn't seek it out, it simply appeared in his news feed, unavoidable. The photo showed Vivian in a flowing white gown, Marcus in a perfectly tailored suit, both of them on the vineyard terrace surrounded by friends and flowers and joy. The caption read, "Dr. and Mrs. Marcus Chen celebrate their perfect day." Adrian looked at the photo for a long time. Vivian was radiant. Genuinely, absolutely happy. And Marcus was looking at her like she'd hung the moon. This was what love looked like. Not the desperate intensity he'd felt with Sienna. Not the comfortable complacency he'd settled into with Vivian before destroying it. This was two people who saw each other fully and chose each other completely. Adrian closed his laptop gently this time. No tears, no breakdown. Just quiet acceptance. His phone buzzed. A text from Jasper. "Hey Dad, my team made the playoffs. Can you come to the game Saturday?" Adrian smiled, a small but genuine expression. "Wouldn't miss it. I'm proud of you, buddy." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Thanks Dad. That means a lot." It was a small victory in the wreckage of his life. But it was something real. Adrian Westfield had learned the hardest way possible that the grass isn't greener where you water it with someone else's tears. That true love isn't found by destroying what you have, it's built by valuing what you hold. That sometimes the person you leave behind doesn't fall apart. Sometimes they rise. And you spend the rest of your life watching them soar, knowing you chose to stay on the ground. He'd thought he was trading up when he left Vivian for Sienna. He'd thought he was choosing passion over predictability, excitement over stability, the life he deserved over the life he had. But he'd actually traded gold for glitter. Substance for sparkle. A woman who would have loved him forever for a woman who loved the idea of him. And Vivian, the woman he'd dismissed as not enough, had become everything. Everything he'd needed without realizing it. Everything he'd lost and could never reclaim. The cruelest irony was this. In leaving her, he'd freed her to become extraordinary. His absence had been the catalyst for her transformation. She'd needed to lose him to find herself. And he'd needed to lose her to realize what he'd had. But by then, it was far too late. Adrian stood at his apartment window, looking out at the city lights, and made peace with his consequences. He would carry this regret for the rest of his life. He would compare every future relationship to what he'd had with Vivian and find them wanting. He would see her success, her happiness, her beautiful life with Marcus, and know that he could have been part of that story if he just valued her when she was his. Some mistakes are too big to overcome. Some choices echo forever. And sometimes karma doesn't destroy you all at once. Sometimes it lets you live, lets you watch the person you discarded become priceless, lets you see everything you threw away flourish in someone else's hands. That was Adrian's punishment. Not destruction, but awareness. Not loss, but understanding of what he'd lost. He'd left his wife to start a family with his pregnant mistress, expecting passion and fulfillment and the life he thought he deserved. What happened next was beyond his imagination. He lost everything worth having and gained a lifetime of regret. He watched his ex-wife become extraordinary while he became ordinary. He learned that sometimes the biggest fool isn't the one who never had a chance at greatness, but the one who held it in his hands and threw it away because he was too blind to recognize its value. Subscribe to Mr. Stephen's Stories for more powerful life lessons about love, loss, and the consequences of our choices. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, your choices today are writing your story tomorrow. Make sure it's one you want to live with. Because some chapters, once written, can never be revised. Some endings, once chosen, are final. And some people, once lost, are lost forever. The woman Adrian discarded became everything he needed. The family he built crumbled. And Adrian Westfield learned that what happened next wasn't beyond imagination at all. It was exactly the karma he'd earned, delivered with perfect, devastating precision.